Would you like to learn how to use aromatics to make your favorite cocktails even tastier?
Well, today on WTF, we're joined by Wisniewski from Alison the Magician to show us 4 great cocktails. A honey ginger penicillin, a peach mojito, a blueberry kombucha Collins, and a spiced pear mimosa.
Hello and welcome to WTF, where we transform food here in the Modernist Pantry Test Kitchen. I'm Janie Wang, one of the owners, and I'm here with Wisniewski of Alison the Magician. And Aaron joined us last week for our part 1 on mocktails, but today he has returned for cocktails. Aaron, can you tell us a little bit about Alison the Magician and what do you guys do?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me back. It's great to be here, Janie. So at Alison the Magician, we are obsessed with one thing, and that is aroma. And since scientifically speaking, about 85 to 90% of our perception of flavor comes from smell rather than taste, you can dramatically enhance the experience of drinking a cocktail or a mocktail by enhancing the aroma. And another fun fact about our sense of smell is that it's unique from all of our other senses in that it's the only one with a direct connection to the memory and emotion section of our brain. So it's a really important piece of the experience of drinking and not just the flavors in the glass.
And one of the really cool things about Alison the Magician is that you have the 2 product lines. You have mists and you have elixirs. Can you explain what is the difference between them?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, most of your perception of flavor comes from smell. But what a lot of people don't realize is that we smell and taste in 2 distinct ways. The first one is through our nose. So even before we take a sip of a drink or a bite of a food, we're actually tasting it in a certain way through our nose, and we call that orthonosal olfaction. So our mists are designed to enhance that part of the eating or drinking experience. So as you're bringing the drink to your lips, that's when you're experiencing a lot of the aroma first, and your brain is telling you what flavors are going to be in the drink. Now, the second way we experience flavor is inside of our mouth, and we call that retronasal olfaction. And so our second line of products, our elixirs, are mixed into the drink, and that really enhances the flavors and the aromatics when you experience flavor in your mouth. And so you can try them and use them on their own, or even better, mix them together for the ultimate cocktail.
Yeah, and we've definitely used a lot of both in our different recipes that we've covered in WTF over the years, but we wanted to bring you in partially in order to share some of your favorite recipes where you think that the elixirs and the mist really brings out what's special about the cocktails. So today we're going to be covering 4 different recipes and going through each one, and Aaron's going to kind of walk you through why they work and what makes them great, and of course which elixir and mist really go well with them. So let's jump right into the first one. What is the first cocktail that we'll be making?
So the first cocktail is going to be a take on a classic cocktail called a penicillin. And a penicillin is a classic cocktail made with some kind of smoky Scotch whiskey, and it's a nice balanced cocktail. We're going to introduce some other flavors in there to make it a little bit more complex aromatically, and we're going to add some ginger into to give it a little bit of spice.
Very cool.
So, should we get started?
Yes.
Great. So the first ingredient is our Scotch whiskey. So we're going to add a little bit of Scotch whiskey. You don't have to be too picky about the type of Scotch whiskey you're going to use in this cocktail, but that little bit of smokiness is important. So that's our first ingredient. Next, we have a ginger and honey syrup that we made. So instead of using sugar for simple syrup, we used honey. And the honey, of course, itself not just adds sweetness, but the lovely aromatics of honey are really important too. And then by cooking some ginger in the simple syrup, we get a little of that ginger spice. Now, unfortunately, when we do that, we lose a lot of the freshness of the ginger, but we're going to add that back in with aromatics.
Okay.
Also, lemon juice, very important part of the cocktail to give it some balance, give it some tartness. Acidity, once again, is the backbone of a good cocktail. So these are our base ingredients. So we've got nice balance, sweet and sour. We've got Scotch whiskey in there. We've got some aroma from the honey and the ginger. But what we're going to do now is add ginger elixir from Alison the Magician.
All right.
So we get this ginger from West Africa, and it's really, really sweet. It's really pungent, really aromatic, and really earthy too. So you get you can see the golden color. And it's pretty potent. I'm going to add 4 or 5 drops, and that should be plenty to give it the flavor that we want in the cocktail. And then we're going to add a little bit of ice.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've always loved about Alison the Magician is that everything is, carefully sourced, small batch made. These are, really, truly high quality products made in Vermont, and we love them. We use them all the time here.
I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah. I think a few times we even used them in non-beverage based recipes too.
They're really versatile. You can use them kind of anywhere you want to add flavor, and since they're just aroma, you can be really creative without having to worry about ruining anything. So even if you add a little too much, or you add not enough, or you think it might be the wrong thing, you're not going to mess anything up. You have complete carte blanche to do whatever you want.
Cool.
So now that the cocktail is nice and chilled down, I'm going to strain it into our classic penicillin glass. Now you can use any glass you want, but this is a very classic glass for this cocktail. And so before we use Alison Magician, we are going to use a traditional garnish too. We're going to use just a little bit of lemon swath and just run that around the outside of the glass like that. And for the aromatic today is a rosemary and honey aromatic. So of course the honey in this is going to bring out the flavor of the honey, which is also going to make the drink taste a little bit sweeter than it actually is. One of the great things about aroma is that you can bring out the sweetness of drinks without necessarily adding more sugar or sweetener.
Okay, so I'm going to taste this before you do it because I want to have a compare. I mean, it's already very good, so I like that.
Great.
It's really nice.
And in this rosemary and honey aromatic, we've selected some really, really nice, rich, green, potent rosemary. And you can actually select rosemary to have what we call different chemotype. So some rosemary is very minty and cedary, and some is very deep and rich and green and sweet. And that's the one that we selected for this. So you get an excellent herbal element without having to muddle rosemary and make rosemary syrup. So just a couple mists, and you should be good to go.
Ooh. It tastes completely different now. So it's just suddenly a lot more complex, a lot smoother for me for some reason, but yeah, it tastes like a totally different drink just from a couple of squirts. I love that. All right, so this is delicious, but we have 3 more recipes that we're going to cover. So we're going to reset our table and be right back. Well, we have one delicious cocktail, and we can't wait to show you the peach mojito coming up next. But remember, if you want to see more episodes like this, subscribe and ring the bell because we are making new content every single week. All right, now Aaron, I love peaches. What do we have?
We have a peach mojito. So I also love peaches. I also don't know anyone who doesn't like mojitos. So this is just a small twist on a traditional mojito. We add some fruit in. And then instead of using lime, we're actually going to use citrus aromatics that include wild orange and tangerine and lemon that really stand up in a different way to the peach flavor.
Interesting.
So this is just going to be some classic mojito technique. And then we're going to layer in aromatics to make it much more sophisticated.
Okay, great.
So first we have some really tasty light rum. And we're going to add not all of it at once. We're just going to add a tiny bit of it at the bottom. And then we are going to add our mint. Now, one of the things that I see often when people are making a mojito is over muddling of the mint. So you don't want to shred the mint. You just want to bruise it enough to release some of that mint flavor. And the reason we have a little bit of alcohol on the bottom there, that alcohol is really good at capturing that mint flavor so it doesn't escape. So we don't need to shred it. We just need to bruise it a little bit and release some of that natural mint flavor into the alcohol. And really, that should be enough. You can smell it from there? So then we're going to add the rest of our rum. A little bit of sugar. Now, traditionally in a mojito you use just sugar. but we're going to use a little bit of sugar, and we're also going to use a little bit of fresh peach juice. So the natural sugars in the peach juice will give it quite a bit of sweetness, and the peach flavor from the peach juice will also make it really, really tasty. And then finally, critical part of any cocktail, but especially mojito, is a little bit of fresh citrus, in this case lime juice. That gives it acidity and balance. And now we're going to chill it down. So another interesting take or twist that we're going to do on this mojito is usually you add soda water to the top of a mojito, but in this case we are going to carbonate the mojito itself. So a little bit of fresh spring water while we're chilling it down, and then tomato leaf elixir. Now you might not think tomatoes are the right ingredient here. They might not line up with peaches, but actually a lot of the natural aromatic constituents in tomatoes are the same ones that are in peaches, believe it or not. So by adding the tomato leaf elixir, you're actually enhancing the peach flavor and adding another interesting element to it as well. So you get more aromatic complexity and depth. So I'm just going to give this a little mix. And then we are going to transfer it over to the siphon. If you wouldn't mind handing me the siphon.
Here you go.
Perfect, thank you. One of the advantages of carbonating the cocktail versus adding soda water is that you have complete control over the ingredients and the amount of carbonation. Whereas if you want a really bubbly drink, and you add soda water, you're going to dilute the drink a lot, and this allows you to have really, really concentrated flavor and still get maximum carbonation, so you get really, really great texture without having to dilute the flavor at all.
Interesting. And one thing you might have noticed is that Aaron is making all these cocktails without measuring, but obviously if you want to do these recipes at home, you can check the links in the description below where every recipe that you see today, as well as all of our other recipes, will be available up on the blog.
And so I charge it with one CO2 canister, and I'm just going to depress. Get rid of some of that excess carbon dioxide, and then we're going to charge it once more, and that will allow the cocktail to absorb as much carbonation as possible.
Awesome.
And you really want really light, effervescent, very bubbly. And then we'll depress that. Great. We'll get some fresh ice in our cocktail glass. And we're almost at the very end, and I'll show you one more trick that I like to do with the mint for the perfect mojito.
Ooh.
We just want to leave a little bit of space at the top of the glass. Always I recommend a little bit of space, as much as an inch. And that's the headspace, and that's where a lot of the aroma collects, and that's why wine glasses are shaped the way they are, and that's why this glass it collects a lot of the aroma. And so what we're going to do is add a little bit more aroma to the headspace, so every time you take a sip, your nose is kind of dipping into that headspace and enhancing the flavor. And before we garnish with this mint, we're just going to give it a little bit of a tap to release some more of those natural mint oils.
Yeah, when you did that, suddenly now there's another rush of mint smell.
Really minty. And then the final thing we're going to do is citrus harvest aromatic. So instead of garnishing it with a lime, like a lot of traditional mojitos, this is a mix of citrus from all over the world, like wild orange and tangerine, Sicilian lemon. And it's going to go really, really nicely with the peach, and of course it's going to add that freshness and the brightness also. So,
well, that looks delicious too. Ooh, that smells so citrusy. I love it.
Citrus and mint and peach is a really, really nice combination.
I know this is not the not summer anymore here, but I feel like it's bringing me back to summer.
This is kind of like any time of the year mojito.
Oh, it's so good. All right, this one's my new favorite. Okay, That one's really, really good. All right, we'll be right back with our third recipe. So we are super excited to start recipe number 3. I can't wait to see what it is. But before we do that, I want to talk real quick about this week's giveaway, which will be a set of the Elixir and the cocktail mist from Alison the Magician. You can leave in the comments below a cocktail that you would like to make with them. So it's that simple. And let's get back to making the cocktail. What is the third one that we have coming up?
So the third one today is celebrating 2 things that I love. Gin botanicals and kombucha.
Ooh, okay.
The reason I love kombucha, other than it being bubbly and effervescent, is that it's got this really interesting combination of being really tart, sometimes a little bit sweet, but also has almost like a savory note that goes really well with spirits like gin that have sometimes like a botanical savory quality. And I just love the botanicals in gin, the juniper and the pine especially, so we're going to really drive those aromatics from the gin, without having to overload the cocktail with too much booze.
Right.
So it's still going to be a lighter alcohol cocktail, but we're going to bring the gin aromatic out.
Great, and it sounds kind of healthy because it has kombucha in it.
It's health food in. Yeah, it's absolutely healthy, 100%. So we're going to start with the spirit. This is a London Dry style gin, and we're going to go just a little bit less maybe than you might normally for a traditional gin and tonic. The next thing we're going to do is a blueberry simple syrup. So fresh blueberries, a little bit of sugar, and this is a gum syrup too to give it a little bit of additional texture. Beautiful color too. Most of the sweetness comes from the blueberries, and you get a little bit of tartness and a little bit of astringency from the skins. And then we're going to balance that as well with just a touch of lemon juice. So we're going to hold off on adding the kombucha. We're going to do kombucha on top because if we stir it, we might lose some of the bubbles of the kombucha. So we're going to do it like that. And the only thing we're going to add is the Alison the Magician Pine Forest Elixir.
Ooh,
so this is a combination of pine needles, fir, balsam fir, Scotch pine. It's really just the aroma of fresh forest, like walking out into the woods. So if you want to give it a little smell.
Yep, that's what it is. So that's so interesting because for the ones that come from like fruits and botanicals, you're like, okay, I get that, but to get the pine flavor, and to mix it with the blueberry, I don't know if I ever would have thought of that.
I feel like it's a very New England thing, kind of pine forest and blueberries in like mid to late summer. It really works, and you know, you don't see pine needles at the bar that often, and so it's a really great opportunity to work with an ingredient that you might not normally work with in a very like straightforward, manageable way. So let's chill this down a little bit. Okay, so we're just gonna a little bit of mix and chill it down a little bit. That is a beautiful color. And then this beautiful glass right here. So we've got plenty of room for a little bit of kombucha on top, and also, once again, we're going to leave a little bit of headspace. Just to right there. So that gives it a little bit of added texture, it gives it a little bit more acidity. That touch of savoriness brings out a lot of the other flavors. One thing that we haven't done today, but often I'll do, is add a tiny bit of salt to cocktails too to bring flavors out. Not enough so it tastes salty, but enough to kind of highlight the other flavors. So we're just going to add a couple of blueberries in here as a treat, and it looks beautiful. And then finally, we also have a pine forest aromatic. So some similar aromatics to the Elixir, but we're going to layer them on top too. So even before you get a sip of the drink, it's like walking into the pine forest. So
it feels like a wilderness drink.
Do you want to try it? Do the before and after thing?
I do, because I'm curious how it's going to affect it.
It is a wild, rugged wilderness drink.
Already delicious.
Right. So just a couple mists of pine forest. That smells really good.
Yeah, it tastes totally different, but also so much more complex, and you do get that pine feel. You're like, am I drinking pine? But no, it's delicious. I love this one, and I'm not a huge kombucha person, but I would drink this one all day.
I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah. All right. So that's my favorite number 3 of the day, but we're going to reset the table, and then we'll be back with number 4. All right, and we're back with our final recipe of the day, and I just want to thank Erin real quick for coming into the test kitchen and sharing how to use these mists and elixirs with us and sharing all these great recipes. And remember, if you do check out the website, you can get all the mists and elixirs that we saw today, as well as tons of other flavors that we actually haven't even covered yet. So hopefully at a later date, we'll get a chance to do those as well. All right, now what is the final cocktail that we have today?
The final cocktail is actually another gin cocktail.
Okay.
So we're going to do kind of a completely different direction with gin. And one of the reasons that gin is so great is because it's so versatile and it's so aromatic. It's a light spirit, so you can do a lot with it, but the botanicals that are naturally in gin already kind of give you an edge on flavor.
Right.
So the last one we did was a little bit lighter and fruitier and more tart, and this one is going to go in an opposite direction. It's going to be a little bit sweeter and richer and more baking spice oriented. And instead of topping with a kombucha, we're going to top with a little bit of sparkling wine. So you still get some of that texture, but you'll see it's a completely different direction.
Cool.
So we are going to start once again with gin, and this is also going to be a slightly lighter alcohol cocktail. So we're going to do gin right there. And then we have made a pear syrup here. So you can see it's kind of thick.
Yep.
So it's very sweet. It's very concentrated in flavor. And once we mix it up, it's going to add a little bit of extra texture to the cocktail, which is one of those things that can kind of fool you into thinking maybe it's a little bit sweeter or richer than it actually is if it's a little bit more mouth coating.
Yeah.
We also made a little bit of rosemary and pear syrup, just a touch of sweetness there. And then we're going to balance it out, as always, with some acidity. In this case, it's lemon juice. And there's going to be some acidity in the sparkling wine also, so we're not going to overdo it on the lemon juice. We're just going to add a touch of that in there. And then we're going to chill it down. We're going to give it a nice stir to try to incorporate as much of that pear flavor from the pear puree as possible. And then what the aromatic we're going to add is a Chinese 5-spice. And so a lot of those spices in Chinese 5-spice, like star anise and cinnamon, we kind of associate with sweeter things like baked goods.
Yeah.
So when we smell them in combination with fruit, it gives us the impression that things are maybe sweeter than they actually are. It also adds a really, really nice layered aromatic complexity. So we're going to hold off on that for now, and this guy into here.
So when you were thinking and conceptualizing this drink, was there a reason why you decided not to include an elixir in it?
No particular reason. We just really wanted to highlight as many different aromatics as we could today, given the time. If I was going to add an elixir to this one, it would probably be the baking spice elixir. And what we can do is maybe go back and try it side by side later on with a few different ones, and you can see how they change. From sweet, feeling sweet to feeling less sweet, to feeling a little bit more refreshing.
That would be really interesting, because one of the things we do here is that every week we give people recipes to work with, but we also encourage people to experiment and try things with their own recipes. So it'll be really interesting to see, just the difference of with or without.
And I really encourage that a lot of experimentation. Get a bunch of these and mix them and try things that you think won't work, and you'd be really surprised how often they actually do. Cool. So we're going to add a little bit of sparkling wine on top of that, and we didn't add it when we mixed because when you mix, it can dissipate the bubbles. So we want just enough to come to the top there. And we're going to add a little bit of fresh rosemary too. It doesn't just look pretty, it also gives a little bit of aromatic, and just like the mint, I'm just going to bruise it to release some of the aromatics ahead of time. And then Chinese 5-spice, so Szechuan peppercorn and star anise and cinnamon and cardamom and clove. And this is going to go right in the head space, that inch at the top of the drink, where as you're drinking it, your nose is going to kind of dip in and you're going to experience that flavor.
Yeah, I can smell that from here. I don't need to dip in to smell that. It smells great. Okay, all these cocktails are amazing. So oh my god, this is so good. I really hope that you give these recipes a shot. All the links will be in the description below for all these recipes, as well as if you haven't watched last week's mocktails episode, we're going to link to it at the end here as well. So thanks again, Aaron, for joining us, and we're super excited to see you again. So until next time, from here in the Modernist Pantry Test Kitchen, I'm Janie Wang.
And I'm Aaron Wisniewski with Alison the Magician.